Oh, yeah.
Oh, man, this is going to be great.
I know, another college basketball episode.
These guys changed the game. Like, even though I hate Tark the Shark for going to Fresno after this, great dude. Welcome, everybody, to the Sports Experience Podcast. My name is Dominic DiTolla, and I'm here with my co-host, Chris Quinn. And today we're going to be giving you a little bit of college basketball action.
Yeah, one of the best college basketball teams ever, and probably one of the better teams that was ever railroaded, if you will.
Definitely railroaded. Definitely an era of dominance.
Yes.
For this program. And regardless of whatever you want to say about recruiting or payments, it's going on around all college basketball, even to this day. Today we're going to talk about the 1986 to 1992 UNLV Rebels.
Yeah, the Runnin' Rebs.
The Runnin' Rebs, yeah.
We were talking about this, about what we should focus in on, and this era of the Runnin' Rebs is such an important thing for college basketball because, like you were saying, they pretty much changed the way it was looked. I mean, they outplayed so many teams.
And they did it with awesome strategy, A, but B, what they did is they really brought swag to college basketball.
Yes.
And I think that's very important. They let the players kind of express themselves in a way that hadn't been seen before. Kind of later you saw it with the Fab Five in Michigan with Steve Fisher and their 5 freshmen. But like this group of players and these teams really redefined college basketball for what it was.
Well, I feel like they might have been like the first team to where outside of Las Vegas, you would see their merchandise almost like more rampant. You know what I mean?
Oh, like Tupac was wearing
yes.
Runnin' Reb shit during all his music videos.
Yeah. That's what I mean. So that's how popular they were. And they were also, somebody saw, one of the things I watched referenced them to be like they were the first pro basketball team. Like that's how good and stacked they were.
Yep.
That's how much better they were than everybody else. Everybody else was pretty much like a college basketball team developing all that stuff, and we'll get into it, but they pretty much had 7 guys that were pro ready.
Yeah, they had not only a stacked roster, but I think it's more important is because all the professional sports leagues, obviously you have the Raiders now, which they're kind of the Raiders of college basketball of the late 80s, early 90s, and even into the early mid 70s with Tark the Shark coaching them, is that they were their first professional team. Yep. I mean, obviously you have the Raiders and Golden Knights now, but you know, they were everybody in Vegas's team.
Yeah, they were the show, if you will. They were one of the biggest shows in Vegas, which is kind of ridiculous to say, but that's how popular they were because it's if you don't know, living in Tucson, not having pro sports, you really gravitate towards these college teams.
And Vegas is much like LA in terms of like there's everything to do, but if you're a winner, people are going to come out and support you en masse.
And I feel like it was something for the locals especially.
Yes,
to hang their hat on, to have pride, like, hey, this is us, finally, Vegas.
Well, yeah, when Tark came from Long Beach State and then previously Pasadena City College, they referred to it as Tumbleweed Tech. Nobody even knew that, Las Vegas had a basketball program.
Yeah, he built that program, which is sad to see kind of what happened to it after he left. But, I mean, hey, you know what? We'll get into that.
Oh, we'll get into it.
So let's do game 1 of this 86 season.
Yeah,
how about that?
Let's go for it.
They beat this Arizona Sean Elliott team, and I want to I'll bring him up later.
Oh, we will in the 89 season,
yes,
that's for sure.
So this 86 team is probably the precursor to their national championship. So it's almost like, because obviously you have a turnover every 3 to 4 years, it's almost like you could see what was going to happen.
And that's kind of the interesting thing is like while you'd have turnover every 3 to 4 years, it was a little different for UNLV at this time because what Tarkanian was doing, and he had this at Long Beach State and even Pasadena College, is he would bring in JUCO guys.
Yeah.
And that's even less of a turnover. Every 2 to 3 years, you're bringing in players. And that's what I found so fascinating is for the 86-87 season, they really assembled a roster of great and productive players.
Well, something that we were talking about before the podcast was he would go with this risk reward of these guys, in which a lot of programs were like, those guys are done. They messed up wherever, Indiana State, they shouldn't ever be in another Division I program. And he would look at them like, no, they just need someone to guide them.
Yeah, and these highfalutin blue bloods of college basketball would always turn their back.
Yes.
And then only when Tark started winning at this program did they go, oh, what he's doing is not right. And it's like, get the fuck out of here. It's always within the rules. You're doing the same thing as us.
I was going to say, they started saying that it was exploitation, which is so ridiculous.
Give me a break. Mike Krzyzewski's bringing in one and done freshmen right now.
Exactly.
You can shove that right up your ass, rat face.
And that's what everybody within the program was saying, was just like, that is so unbelievably insulting, first off, because he's helping these guys become not just basketball players, but essentially better men. And that was something that, with the media of that time, was so ridiculously negative towards UNLV. And you can only look at it in retrospect, because I was, I think, like 6, when they won the national championship. But in that time, it was racism and this look of blue blood.
Yes.
And them turning their backs on it.
And see, for me, growing up, being a fan of like WAC and Big West teams now, even like that, I always, even though we coached at Fresno, and it makes me still mad, I have always had mad respect for Jerry Tarkanian, because he was like, our program has no money. How can we use the system to our advantage and build competitive teams? And they were the only ones that they targeted too. Is anyone that stuck a middle finger out to the cartel known as the NCAA, where they were like, oh, well, they're not doing it the way we want to.
Yeah.
And disgusting.
Yeah. We might get into this in our Tark episode. We've been talking about it. But he actually won a lawsuit against the NCAA.
Back in the 70s, after he took him to the Final Four in 76, 77, I believe.
Then I think he won another one again, possibly not. So I haven't researched it as much, but they've been looking at this program so much more egregiously than any other program, and they try and get them on all these like minor violations, and they try and stack it up, and it's really sad, and we'll bring it up. God, I just keep saying that.
It's like the NFL with the Raiders. He's basically the Al Davis of college babasketball.
Because he's doing something different.
And then everyone is like trying to come down on him because he's Armenian. I remember an NCAA official called him a rug merchant. Like, I mean, they hated him because he exposed them for what they were.
Yep.
And their selective enforcement, and the selective enforcement continues to this day with people that aren't Jerry Tarkanian.
Yes, 100%.
And that's why I find this era of UNLV basketball so badass, because the world is against them. They're not playing in the Pac-10. They're not, getting their dick sucked like a John Wooden would in the 1960s and 1970s.
Yep.
They're like, these are our players. Match us up. You beat us, but if you don't go crying to anybody else. We're playing within the, realm of the rules.
Yeah. Well, they weren't getting any TV time.
Nope.
So they pretty much made like we said, they made their program out of like, hey, we don't necessarily care what your past was. We care what you're going to come and be on our team.
Exactly.
You know? Which is the way it should be, because, I mean, these guys, I call them guys, they're kids still.
They are. They're really just kids.
Yeah.
But that 86-87 season.
It's that you could see it starting.
Because they had finally emerged out of that post-Final Four probation.
Yep.
And they had really put it all together, and they go 37-2 with an 18-0 record in the PCAA, because they haven't been merged into the Big West yet.
Yep.
So they end the year as the number 1 overall seed and number 1 ranking going into the NCAA tournament. And they are led by NBAers like Armin Gilliam. I mean, he had over 23 points a game and 9.3 rebounds. You have Freddie Barnes averaging pretty much Freddie Banks.
Yeah.
Almost 20 points a game. Gerard Padillo. And then, I mean, what's his name? Mark Wade getting over 11 assists a game.
Yeah.
I mean, they are a stacked roster. And most of these guys are seniors, so it's all kind of coalesced this season. But they are just lighting people up. And that's the most fascinating thing about Tark the Shark, which I always respect, is they were averaging 90 points a game in the 70s without a three-point line and a shot clock.
Yeah,
I mean, up-tempo offense and the amoeba defense, which is a nice mix of man and zone, which really works in college as opposed to the pros because you can really trap people and make people have bad mistakes.
And well, you can exploit teams' vulnerabilities because in college you don't necessarily have a full roster of professionals. So you can really, and I love you bringing up the amoeba because Tark was so into it that, I mean, it's essentially the defense he ran his entire career. And once teams bought into it, you could see how well it paid off.
And that's kind of the thing is, you know, you get these junior college guys together, guys that have been discarded or whatever, or even like low heralded recruits. Because if you're a high heralded recruit, you're going to the Pac-10, you're going to the Big Ten. You know, you're going
just a bigger conference.
Exactly.
It's just you have that TV time, you have all that shit. And I want to bring up Gilliam. I think he was one of these guys that was. I think he was a New York street tough. Is what they said because that was the time, and bigger programs didn't want to bring him in. Tark brought him in and he was literally like their number one player.
And that was always his attitude. And even when he was at Fresno, it was just like, look, you've got some issues. We understand that. If you can play by the rules, we'll do whatever we can to improve your life and let you just play basketball and get an education.
Yeah.
And, you know, God bless that man. Even though, you know, everyone wants to demonize him, he at least provided that for these players.
Yeah, everybody has I feel like everybody has their own opinion, and a lot of opinions were forged when the media was pretty much making this guy out to be exactly who he wasn't, which is kind of sad. But I feel like now when everybody has the retrospect, they're like, oh, he was kind of doing what programs do now all the time.
Well, to me, he wasn't doing anything different than what a Kentucky was doing or what a North Carolina or even a Duke was doing. It's just he was the one that told the NCAA to go fuck themselves. And that's why they all pounced on him. And that's why everyone had a negative connotation associated with UNLV as opposed to, man, these guys can ball. These guys can play. And they, in that season, 86-87, they roll right to the Final Four.
Yeah.
You know, Elite Eight, they beat Iowa 84-81, and then in the national semifinal, they run into Indiana.
Yeah, really good Indiana team.
Really good team. Danny Alford, Keith Smart, and then they end up losing in the national semifinal 97-93. But it's still an incredible year, and you really see the groundwork laid for a future of success with this program.
Yes, definitely. And this is what I feel like people might not understand for this time is this Final Four puts it into recruits' heads like, hey, I can go to UNLV.
Yeah.
And that's when we see the Sean Elliott of Vegas come around. Or no, he comes in at 89.
Yeah.
But that's when we see these top recruits come to UNLV instead of, you know, being a bench player on Duke, or you know what I mean?
Like waiting your turn.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
If you can play in Vegas, Tark's going to give you minutes.
Yep.
And that's what I found so fascinating is that, look, if you can play, come here and play. Keep your nose clean, you know, do your best. We got a spot for you.
Well, here's the thing, because obviously they have a risk reward, which is, I feel like every program has, but for them, they've had players that have messed up, and I feel like it's constantly guilty by association.
Yep.
Even though the program immediately is like, oh, that player we didn't know, obviously.
Well, the Lloyd Daniels thing is definitely one of those. For those of you who don't know, Lloyd Daniels was a tremendous recruit, just with a lot of baggage. He's 87, 88.
He's one of these that
from New York.
People said that if he had cleaned his shit up, he might have been one of the great college basketball players.
Absolutely.
He immediately goes to Vegas, and what happens?
I believe 2 weeks before he enrolls in classes, well, he's already enrolled, but he's ready to start classes.
Yep.
He gets picked up by an undercover officer for buying crack cocaine.
Yes.
But to Tark's credit, he threw up his hands and said, I want nothing to do with this guy.
Yes.
Like, he broke the rule. Like, we can't have him. But that just led more into the negative connotation of this program. And it's like, well, if that happened at any other program, they would have kicked him out, right?
Yes, exactly. That's the thing, is it's looked at as the program's fault for bringing him in, which is such a incorrect way to look at this.
Exactly.
If you see the footage of him getting busted, though,
it's hilarious.
The cop,
God.
The cop, and this is what I want to say: the locals are such Runnin' Reb fans that the cop they see some tall ass dude and he go, "Tell me that's not a rebel," and because he's 6'9", 6'10", and then they go, "Oh, it's Lloyd Daniels," and he goes, "Oh, damn it.
We have to do this."
Yes, and you can see how sad he is. And then I think the image that is damning for this program and for white America, blue blood, is he has the UNLV cap when they're putting him away, essentially. So, like, it's such an image for this program, unfortunately.
It is, and it's sad, but they keep moving along. I mean, 87-88 was a tough year for them.
Well, rebuilding.
It was a rebuild because you lose Gilliam, you lose Banks, and you lose Mark Wade.
Yep.
So, I mean, you lose three of your starters. I mean, you lose your point guard and your best two scorers. But, I mean, they keep going along. It's just a whole bunch of guys picking up those minutes that season.
Yes.
And to their credit, I mean, Padillo had a really great year. I mean, they went 28-6 and 15-3 in the PCAA, so it's not like they were doormats.
No, they're
trying to figure stuff out. Greg Anthony had transferred, so he had to sit out because he was at Portland where he won, what is the old conference? The West Coast Conference my cousin used to play in. He was their freshman of the year.
Okay.
I mean, he was just, looking for bigger and better opportunities, but per NCAA transfer rules, which are total horseshit, he had to sit out the season. But, they move along and they go into the tournament, but they end up losing.
Yeah, this you can just see this is definitely a rebuild year, and this happens in programs. But to his credit, you can just see the potential already.
Yes, yeah. You have guys on the roster who can really play, and really you're developing a core for deep tournament runs going there. And it's his freshman year too. But Stacey Augmon, the plastic man, because Stacey Augmon, if you don't know, he played in the NBA, had a pretty successful career with the Hawks and the Blazers. He was like 6'8", 6'9", but he had like the longest arms of anyone I've ever seen with that frame.
Yeah.
And, Plastic Man's it's a perfect nickname for him. He was 3 times NCAA Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah.
Because he could just stick to guys and just contort his body in ways to get in front of them that was so fascinating to watch.
Well, something that I found actually really interesting about him, because, we do all this research, and Stacey was talking about in high school, he was a scorer, because he was such a great athlete. He's obviously going to be the number one scorer. He said he went to UNLV, and in the first run of practices, he realized he was not going to be the scorer, and he needed
not on that team.
He needed to up his defense, and he said that he started to work on his defense like he essentially was working on his offense. Like when you're a kid, you're just shooting all the time.
Yeah.
He was like, I was working on my defense all the time. And his teammates are talk about it later on. They're just like, that gave us such a boost. When you would see Stacey just lock a dude down, and you'd just be like, yep.
Well, and for that defense that they played, it takes so much discipline to make it successful.
Yes.
And when you have a stopper like that who can play either of the forward positions, that's someone you got to watch out for as an opponent, because he's always going to be in the right spot. He's got those long arms. He's very disciplined. Like, you can't get away from him because he always reads his assignment correctly. And Stacey Augmon is one of the best college basketball players that nobody ever talks about anymore.
Hey everybody, just want to take a quick break to let you know that our Sports Experience podcast is brought to you by Engle Studio here, and they're here in Tucson for all your recording needs.
Yeah, no, he was, without a doubt, made this team hum, because Tark said it many a times, is this team, everybody talks about how many points we score, all this shit, but it all comes from the defense.
Yeah, because the defense creates the offense.
Yep.
And this was a team, despite the fact they're out in the second round of the tournament because they lost to Iowa, they had 8 guys averaging 19 minutes a game.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they really kind of came together and were like, okay, we're rebuilding, but we're still really good.
Yeah.
So I think it really, that season, although it ended, prematurely, it set the stage for what you're going to see over the next 3 years, where they really started kicking some ass.
Exactly, because this is where Greg Anthony comes in. This is where Stacy becomes the defensive player of the year.
Exactly. And then you get a freshman like an Anderson Hunt playing the 2 guard,
Yep.
and you get David Butler coming in to, play in the front court, and junior college transfer, someone really solidifying this roster.
Yes. So this is this is the 89 season where it's all almost there. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, and a lot of people in Tucson actually are familiar with this season from UNLV.
Yes. So do you want to just hop right into the tourney?
Well, I want to go over how good this team was,
Okay.
because they're 28-9, 16-2. They've moved to the Big West finally, and they end up 15th in the AP poll, and they're a 4 seed.
Yes.
Okay, so I mean, they've moved up as opposed to the last year. Butler comes in, just starts dominating, 15.4 points a game, 6.4 rebounds. Augman's at 15.3 and then 7.4 rebounds. Anthony's a stud with 13 points and 6.6 assists. And then Hunt comes in with 12 points and 3.6 assists a game. And then you have Moses Scurry and Clint Rossum and Barry Young coming off the bench. I mean, and George Ackles. Like, you have a legit team in place,
Yes.
ready to make some deep tournament runs. And what they end up doing in the Sweet 16, as you alluded to, is they meet up with number 1 seed, Final Four for the first time, well, the previous season, Arizona.
And this is where we see. So I saw a lot of similarities with this Arizona team and this UNLV team. So Sean Elliott grew up in Tucson,
Yep.
went to U of A. Greg Anthony grew up in Vegas, had a stint in Portland, like you said, and then was like, no, I need to go to UNLV.
They're building something here.
And that's what he said. He was just like, I want to be a run-and reb. And we see these two teams collide. So, like I said, in the 86, they beat them in that first game. And then we see them beat this Arizona team that many people thought that was the team that was going to be their first national championship.
Of any of the Lute Olson teams that failed in the tournament, especially even the ones that lost to Santa Clara or East Tennessee State and shit like that, this was the one that should have gone. And the way the Final Four broke out that year, if they beat UNLV, they likely end up winning it all. But UNLV in that game, they were up, for most of the game. They had dominated them. Elliott was really cold until the late second half as far as scoring, basically because you have Stacey Augman on his ass and his plastic man ability. But Arizona takes a late lead, but what ends up happening is Anderson Hunt, to his credit, takes a three-pointer at basically as time expires. A lot of Arizona fans claims it's a charge.
Yep.
A lot of them do. But he hits a turnaround from 3 and sends them into the Elite 8. And to their credit, UNLV likely shouldn't have won that game the way that they had played and let Arizona get back into it, but they held tough and they made the shot when they needed to.
I was going to say, because they were such a young team, they were almost falling apart there at the end, but they they bailed themselves out. And I like the no call, even though I'm an Arizona, you got
to let them play in the last seconds of a game.
You can't be calling bullshit.
You're just like, that son of a bitch, that shot's going in. God damn you, Anderson
exactly.
Hunt. But they beat Arizona, but they end up losing to the eventual NCAA tournament runner-up Seton Hall in the Elite 8.
Yes.
But the pieces are in place. They're young. They're ready to keep kicking ass no matter what distractions from the NCAA they have swirling around them. And then 89-90 happens, and that is arguably one of the most dominant teams in college basketball history.
So this is something that I found interesting that I didn't know is from 88-89 to 89-90, they had their 5 starters return.
Exactly. And you never see that anymore.
No, not even a little bit.
Well, they have 4 of the 5 starters return because they get a little JUCO infusion.
Well, here's the thing. So they have their 5 starters return, but everybody realizes that they have this new guy coming around, and Tark is just like, he was so good that I knew that somebody had to like he was our best player right away.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know, that gentleman was Larry Grandmama Johnson, who was the first pick in the 91 NBA draft by the Charlotte Hornets.
Something that this is where they become what people say is like the closest to a pro team is right here. Because Larry Johnson is essentially a pro athlete. Like he's fully formed.
Well, people were talking about, from my research, he had played 2 years at junior college in Odessa, Texas. After his second year in JUCO, and I know we mentioned this in the Sean Kemp one where he was at Trinity Valley or whatever in Texas.
Yeah.
After his second year, people were talking about Larry Johnson as a lottery pick.
Yeah.
Like he didn't need to play big-time college basketball after his sophomore year. People were already intrigued. Obviously, he wasn't going to get drafted number 1, but he would have gone in the lottery range to a team maybe like the Sonics looking to take a chance on a Sean Kemp, and likely would have flourished. But whatever it is that got him to UNLV.
Yeah, I mean,
whatever it is, that's up for debate.
Yep.
But whatever it is that got him there, he was there, and they had a very strong 6-man rotation in 88, 89.
Oh, it was ridiculous. The piece that he filled in this was he was the focus that everybody took on offense, but he was still worked into this defensive scheme so well, and this is something that
He was a great power forward. I mean,
one of the best. People say he might have been the best college power forward because he was more developed. So he was fully, like I said, he was like fully developed. He was like 250, full muscle, and had almost like a soft touch, which almost comes later on and that kind of shit. But what Tark said was he's the greatest teammate I've ever coached.
Yeah, he just wanted a ball. He just wanted to play. And that's what made it such a perfect infusion of this team, because obviously you kick Scurry to the bench, but that year Johnson's averaging 20.6 points a game, 11.4 rebounds. Hunt's at 15.9 points a game and 4.1 assists. Butler's at 15.8 and 7.4 rebounds. Ogman's going nuts all over the freaking stat sheet with 14.2 points, 6.9 rebounds, and 3.7 assists. And then Anthony, he's already there, averaging basically 11.2 points per game and 7.4 assists.
And running the show.
And then you get Scurry off the bench. I mean, like, it's just a pro ready-made team. And, you know, despite some up and downs, and a lot of players were suspended that year because the NCAA was like, oh, we can't have these bastards winning.
So they go, what do they go, 35-5?
Yeah, they go 35-5 that year.
Okay, so I want to talk about this because a lot of people think they could have been an undefeated team, but literally every single time it would be like the day before, they'd be like, oh, the NCAA came in and Ogden's suspended because he didn't pay his long distance bill at the last hotel. This is the kind of shit that they kept going.
It's the most like nitpicky crap.
Yep.
And that's, you know, that's why I always respect Tarkanian, is the fact that A, he never backs down from the NCAA.
Yep.
But B, he always calls them out on their shit. But by that same token, because he never, you know, plays the game and gets on his knees like a Mike Krzyzewski or a Dean Smith or John Wooden, he makes him an easy target. It makes his program an easy target. It like opens them up to as much not only criticism but selective enforcement that whatever that piece of shit cartel, you know, organization wants to pull on them.
It says, I read that they had 10 players suspended throughout the season. So, like, if you think about that, a program will have, like, one player out, and they'll be like, damn. But, like we said, it's stuff that other programs did across the board and have never been punished for.
They never played the game, but they always wore the black hat.
Yeah.
And that's why I like them.
I know.
That's why people like them.
I know.
Is that they were just like,
both.
This is garbage.
Yeah, no, both off the field, off the court, and on the court because of the way they played. I love all of it.
Well, they had such a swag because they would go into games and have already won because they thought they were better than everyone.
Yeah.
They thought they were like, we're better than you. and we're going to show you why we're better than you.
Yes.
And adding Larry Johnson to this stew of talent just made them a dominant force.
Fucking A. Larry Johnson literally was that final piece to that puzzle because, like we were talking about, they were destroying teams.
Yeah, and I mean, they finished second in the AP poll, so they're rolling into the tournament as the number 1 seed.
Hold on. They finished second, and throughout their season, they had 10 players suspended.
That's what I mean.
It's so obvious that they were the best team, and I think their first game against Ohio State?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And they said that was their hardest game.
Yeah, and
so,
which is funny because the only team that gave them issues in that tournament was Ball State.
And
in the Sweet 16 where they won by 2.
Yeah.
But then they go into the Elite 8 and they somehow play the Cinderella Loyola Marymount team.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And the reason that's important is Loyola Marymount at the time, coached by Paul Westhead, were a very tempo-based team in terms of we're scoring at least a C note every night.
Yep.
We're scoring at least 100 every night. But what happened in the West Coast Conference tournament that year is their star, Hank Gathers, ended up dying from his heart condition.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But they took all of that as inspiration and just upset after upset after upset. They end up playing UNLV, but it doesn't matter because UNLV got in that game, they win 100 and I believe 31 to 101.
Yeah.
It's like, and that's what's so cool about this team is like, oh, you want to play a low-scoring, brawl fest? Okay, we'll beat your ass.
Yeah.
You want to go up and down and, make outlet passes like Wes Unseld? Yeah, we can play that game too. Like, you name the time and place, and we're going to play you and beat you at your own damn game.
I was going to say, this was like the Wes Unseld's team here because this is like what he essentially was doing. And I heard the big man talking about that. Scurry, Johnson even was talking about it.
Yeah.
It's like when you grab a rebound, if you're not looking for an outlet pass, you better be ready to bring the ball up yourself.
Exactly.
Like, because the guards are gone. You know, they're not like going to be doubling back like, oh, I'm right here. It's like, no, they're already sprinting down the court.
They've broken everything out and they've spread the floor.
Yes.
And that it's entertaining to watch.
Oh,
it's
I love it.
really entertaining to watch. So they end up in the Final Four at Old McNichols in Denver, Colorado. And they face off against a very good Georgia Tech team.
Mm-hmm.
I believe Kenny Anderson was their point guard that year. He had a successful career in the NBA, and they beat him by 9. They beat him pretty handily in this national semifinal, and that's Tark's first Final Four win.
Yeah.
And it's UNLV's first trip to a championship game, and they end up playing a very blue blood program in Duke, led by Mike Krzyzewski, Bobby Hurley, who is Rat-Faced Jr., and they have Christian Leitner and all these other, like hoity-toity, highfalutin douchebags on their team.
Well, I want to talk about this because this was matched up as the two different teams. The guys from
the
different...
media played it up.
Yes, very much so. The guys from the different sides of the track. But something that I felt like is maybe looked at retrospective, in retrospect is... This Duke team is looked at as like the best college basketball team ever. They went
played
to
it
4
the quote right way.
Exactly. They went to 4 consecutive Final Fours. If you look at it, UNLV should have beat them 2 years in a row.
Oh, I totally agree.
And we should be talking about UNLV being one of the best college basketball teams of all time, but that shit gets like blown over because we get into what the media essentially labeled them as.
The narrative didn't want UNLV there.
Exactly.
They wanted North Carolina and Duke playing in a national championship.
Or a Big East, or like
they even wanted Arizona playing Duke in a national championship.
Sure.
Or UCLA. But you know what? UNLV was there.
Yes.
They had their renegade swag, and they rolled in, and they decided, and this is the only thing I can equate it to after watching this game. You know that scene from The Outsiders at the very end where the Socias just beat the shit out of the Greaser, or the Greasers beat the shit out of the Socias?
Yes.
Yeah. Larry Johnson went full Swayze on that entire Duke roster.
So the game wasn't even necessarily close, and then there's this spurt, which is, I think, still the most ridiculous thing.
It was like an 18-point run.
It's an
in the second
18-0 in 3 minutes. So they were talking about it. They were like, dude, we could have probably like shot from half court. That's how we felt. Like everything was going in. And when they would come down,
Ogman was talking about it.
Yeah.
And he was just like, that was our night.
Yes.
And you had Tark the Shark with his towel on his shoulder, sucking all the water from it.
Oh, it's so disgusting.
But there's like about the 5-minute mark when they are just completely have this game in hand where he just like sits back and was like, yeah, we're national champions.
Well, you will never see this from another coach. He literally sits on the bench, puts his hands behind his head, and kicks back like, I don't have to do anything else.
These guys have got it.
I don't necessarily like Krzyzewski. I've never necessarily liked him, but I really liked what he said about this game.
Yeah.
He goes, we could have played them 20 times. We never would have beaten them. They were so much better than us. And I have to give it up to him for that and then they come back next year. We'll get into that.
Yeah.
But like Duke was just like, we were just so overmatched.
Yeah. Mean Joe Green had a quote when he played for the Steelers talking about their first AFC championship where they went to the Super Bowl. And he was like talking about, when they tell you you're in the zone for a sport, he's like, look, I played in the NFL for 13 years. You don't go to the zone very often, but in that game, we went to the zone.
Yeah.
And when you go to the zone, you know exactly what it feels like. And they were just dropping buckets ridiculously and doing it with the flair and swag
that they had been doing all year, I feel like,
and that people hated it.
Yeah.
The writers and all the NCAA people were like the Robin Williams with Golf and Tiger was like, oh my God.
Yeah. Do you ever think that like Krzyzewski looks at the media and he's just like, guys, maybe don't throw gas on that fire?
Right.
Because that's like literally what the media was doing, because I want to bring this up. They kept calling them thugs and they kept calling them shit like this. But what was Greg Anthony?
Greg Anthony was the president of the UNLV College Republicans.
So every time they would call him that, they would all just like laugh and like look over at Greg like, yeah, you're so thugging.
You're such a thug.
Yes. So, but this is the thought because of people associated with this program that, got in trouble before and all this shit. And this is why I hate the lumping in of college athletes where it's not like, hey, let's look at this guy as an individual.
Yeah.
It's almost just like, oh, you have that run in Rebs, you must be a thug.
Yeah, you're wearing the red and silver, now you're a piece of shit.
Yeah.
And it's so basic and pathetic. You can't enjoy this team for what it was, because what it was one of the most arguably dominant college basketball teams that's ever existed. It's still at 30 points, the 103-73 win, the highest margin of victory in an NCAA championship game for basketball.
I don't think you will see that.
Oh, you'll never. No, not at all.
Not with the way that the game is played now. I want to say this, and I can't remember if it was Greg Anthony or Stacey Augmon, but they said the victory was so sweet because before leading up, everyone was just like, oh, Duke's these good guys, UNLV's these bad guys. And at the core, they're like, how are they better people than us?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, how are you guys putting this out as the narrative? And he said it was just, it like felt so good after, because they, like you said, they destroyed them.
No, it like I said, it was that final scene from The Outsiders, and Larry Johnson was just laying Swayze roundhouses and dunking and open three-pointers, and Duke just looked hapless.
I'm trying to think of a Ponyboy reference, but I haven't seen.
Stay golden, Larry Johnson. Stay golden, bitch.
I was like, I haven't seen Outsiders in so long. I'm going to grease the shit out of my hair. But so they win the national championship. Everything is riding high, and of course the NCAA comes in.
And the NCAA does what it does, and it's really unfortunate. You want to get into that part?
So this is where the photo comes out.
The photo.
I think it's 2 months after they win.
Yes, it is.
So there's this guy, just a kick-ass dude.
Yeah, really upstanding member of society.
Some people think he's a bit of a knucklehead. All right? Some people think he's a bit of a, rabble-rouser. How about that?
Yeah.
His name's Richard Perry. His nickname is the Fixer.
Which is horrible for any college sport to be associated with.
He's associated with the Boston College point shaving scandal. So he's already associated with college basketball, gambling, and
He's basically a side character in Goodfellas you don't see.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
No, that's perfect because that's who he is. So what is the worst thing that you could do for this UNLV team who is pretty much being portrayed as a bunch of knuckleheads? Hey, let's use that one
Yeah,
again.
like unless they're like robbing places or raping women, point shaving is like the biggest no-no for college sports.
Yes. No, and this is the big thing that I felt like they were so scared of this Las Vegas team because they just came off of this gambling scandal and this is NCAA. They don't ever want to see that again because it takes away from the legitimacy of the game.
But it's like what we talked about in our MLB episode. They're going to do whatever it is to sweep things under the rug for as long as they can. But unless they take any hardcore action, or if they had in the early 80s said, UNLV, you get the death penalty, it's going to keep happening.
Yeah.
And it's going to blow up in your face. And there are pictures that emerge of this gentleman with 3 of UNLV's starters in a hot tub together.
And they're obviously partying.
Yes.
You know,
obviously having some fun.
Yes.
Don't know what the party favors were, but it looked like a really enjoyable excursion.
Yes, that was something, and I think it was Jimmy Kimmel who's like, he grew up in Vegas, and he was like a Rebs fan his whole life, and he was just like, it was such an awful picture. It was awful to see them in there with Richard the Fixer Perry. It was awful to see the smiles on everybody's faces because everyone just looks like they're having the best time, just like, yeah! And this is what is so unfortunate, and what I don't agree with is people are like, these kids are in this program. You're supposed to know exactly what they're doing at all times.
You can't keep
That's
track of them.
impossible.
And that's the issue that Steve Fisher ran into at Michigan,
Yes.
where he was unceremoniously fired, but thank the hell Christ he landed at San Diego State and rebuilt whatever shit show that was. But no, you can't watch these kids 24 hours a day. They're still kids. They're
Yes.
going to make stupid decisions. If I was 20 years old and someone said, hey, I've got a bunch of Coke and booze at my house. You want to party in a hot tub with hot ladies? Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I do.
I would be the next Vanilla Ice.
Yes.
I agree.
You know what? Here, take me.
Yes. Ice,
Baby.
baby. But yes, it's so, and this is what sucks, is these kids are very impressionable and they're very easily duped. And
I won't even say duped. It's just like, I'm going to go to a party. I don't necessarily know what this guy's story is.
that was the other thing, is they said they didn't know who he was at the time. This is what they said. And they found out who he was later. And they're like, well, we're never going to talk to him, you know? And it wasn't even like they were interacting like that. It was literally like a fucking party.
Well, and if you think about it, if you're 20 years old, most of which these kids likely growing up in poverty, you're not getting paid by the university. Maybe you're getting paid by boosters, which is probably where you get in trouble. But by that same token, if someone says, hey, I have an awesome party going on, you're the guests of honor, do you want to come? How are you going to say no to that?
Yeah.
Like, we'll take care of you. And, is it a dumb decision? Absolutely. But it's a dumb decision any 20-year-old would make, a 21-year-old would make in that particular situation.
Yeah, that's what's, I think, made the NCAA so scared of Vegas, because I feel like it was there more readily,
Oh, absolutely. They're more readily. And pro sports franchises, we had talked about this before, they were always reticent to move to Vegas.
Yep.
Thank God they gave them a hockey team. Thank God Mark Davis is a douchebag and said, oh, I have a better offer in Las Vegas.
Yes, no, I agree, because that's somewhere where it should have professional sports, because it's, I mean, we could do a whole episode on that shit, but I mean, it's something that is sad because we see them coming down almost too hard on this amateur program.
And if you think about it, you see these hoity-toity people, these blue blood people, in the NCAA programs and then in the NCAA itself. When you see a picture like that, it's manna from heaven for you. It's just like, this is why this program is wrong. This is why we need to dismiss everything that they've accomplished. This is why we're going to selectively enforce everything against them when Kentucky at the time was just getting put on probation. Like, they're the easy scapegoat. And that's what makes me so angry. It's like, did these guys make a poor choice? Absolutely they did. But it doesn't mean you need to tear everything the F down.
Yes, and this is where I want to introduce this next player.
Yes.
Robert Maxim.
Yep. Yes.
He is the president of the university at the time, UNLV, and his mission is to make UNLV the Harvard of the West, or at least, so that's what people always say, but at least he wants to make them academically viable, not looked at as
a basketball school,
yes.
a sports school,
an sports
attraction for people in Las Vegas.
Yes.
And what pisses me off is I see a lot of parallels with this douchebag as I do to Tad Foote, who was running the University of Miami in the 80s.
Yeah.
He did the exact same thing. He was like, oh, well, let's, put all this thuggishness aside.
Yes.
And let's build an academic institution and shit on all the people generating revenue, especially the players who are doing it not getting compensated at all as far as their likenesses being used or their ability on the athletic field. Let's just ignore that and become an academic institution. And if it was one thing if he said, hey, let's just focus on academics here, it's still a university. If he had said, it's still a university, our basketball program is awesome, fine. I have no issue with that. But when you start shitting on the players and going after Tark, that's where my main issue is with this guy.
And undermining the program, because they said, essentially, we find this out later, is he was leaking stuff to the media for years trying to get Tark out.
And leaking things to the NCAA, him and his cronies videotaping, quote, illegal practices, end quote.
Yeah. No, it's one of the shittiest things, because like I said before, this Duke team was looked at as the greatest college basketball team ever. This UNLV team, if they didn't have literally everybody outside of this tiny little program chop blocking them, they could have been back-to-back-to-back champions.
Well, and that's the whole...
Maybe just back-to-back, sorry, because the JUCO.
Well, whatever. But
whatever. But you know what I mean?
No, I know exactly what you mean, but that's what I think brought all of these guys together.
Yeah.
Especially that core six-man rotation is like... It is us against the world.
Yeah.
Because the world hates us. We have Papa Tark right here, and that's who we're going to roll with. And that's exactly what they did in that season, because they were arguably, regular season-wise, one of the most dominant NCAA programs that has ever existed.
So let's talk about the photo.
1991.
So the photo comes out. Robert Maxim then fires Tark, and then it's like a revolt, essentially. Like the fans are like, this is insane. You know, like they had like fired Maxim shit all out. You know what I mean?
Well, it's like, why fire Tark? I didn't see his ass in the hot tub.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing. It's the whole Steve Fisher argument. You're still an adult. Like, you have obligations that aren't dedicated to putting watchers on these kids 24 hours a day.
And it's not like Tark was coming out being like, we're not going to punish these kids, or you know what I mean? It's not like he was...
You don't think they were running extra laps for being dumbasses?
Exactly.
You don't think he was chewing their asses out and trying to be like, you're a kid, I get it, but understand who the hell you hang out with and the consequences that come from that. The spotlight's on us. You don't think he didn't give them a tongue lashing for that, or didn't ride their asses the entire season?
Yeah.
Like,
I'll tell you what, you can tell what a group they are, because Larry Johnson, Stacey Augmon, Greg Anthony all decide to come back, and they're literally foregoing millions of dollars to do this.
Oh, they totally are, because Augmon, what's his name? It was Augmon, Butler, Larry Johnson, and oh God, what was his name? And Greg Anthony.
And Anthony, yeah.
They were all drafted in the NBA.
Yeah.
All of them but Butler were first-round picks. Larry Johnson was the first pick in the damn draft.
They all almost were in the top 10.
And the reason they came back was the NCAA, because of this, they were going to suspend them in the postseason from defending their title.
Which is insane.
Which is crazy, but luckily they were able to
fight it.
And put it off for another year, because it was all about title defense. Everybody had decided to come back, forgo millions of dollars in guaranteed contracts as first-round picks. And what ended up happening was just, in the regular season, was just absolute dominance. I mean, they finished fourth in scoring at over 97 points a game that year. Just absolutely kicking ass. Because your core six guys are back.
They're, without a doubt, the best team. So we see them just steamrolling people from. So I think they had something like a 44 game winning streak. Okay.
Yeah.
So 44 game winning streak.
They go 30-0 in the regular season.
Yep.
I mean, they are just steamrolling people, and everyone's doing what they're supposed to. Johnson, 22.7 points a game, almost 11 rebounds. Hunt, 17.2 points a game, 2.9 assists. Augman, everywhere, 16.5 points a game, 7.3 rebounds, 3.6 assists. Anthony, 11.6 points a game, 8.9 assists per game. I mean, George Ackles, everyone, Elmore Spencer, these guys are really responding to all of this.
Yeah, no, they are without it. I mean, like I'm saying, they're the best starting five, and I feel like we just got to hop right into.
And then Butler's not even there. Butler's gone. Yeah, he graduated. So I mean, they're dominating people. They have a great rotation. I mean, there's nobody that's stopping them. Nobody's beat them in the regular season or the Big West tournament.
No.
Number one overall. I mean, this could be the next team since the 1976, I believe, Indiana Hoosiers, who went undefeated through an entire,
I feel like they should have been too. So
I do too. It makes me sick to think about. I mean, they go into the tournament, they beat Montana, they beat Georgetown, they beat Utah, they beat Seton Hall, and they end up in the Final Four. I mean, this is a year they go to Fayetteville, play number 2 Arkansas on the road. Nolan Richardson, their coach, championship-winning coach, I want to point out, in 1994, Arkansas, great basketball program at that time.
Yeah.
They beat them. They beat them in Fayetteville when they're number 2. I mean, this is the not fucking around crew.
Yeah, they're straight up the best team, and they run into Duke again, who
March 30th, 1991
has
disgusting.
Just like UNLV has all of these returning players.
Well, Duke this year,
and then they have this.
They have experience with Leitner and Hurley, but they also and Brian Hill and Tyrone Hill, but they have a freshman come in who's quite the player.
So many Hills on that team.
So many.
But this is what people were talking about: was Duke was like UNLV before Larry Johnson, and then they get this player that kind of puts it all together in Grant Hill, but it's not.
Or Brian Davis, that was what it was. I think. Yeah, but still, you're right.
Yeah,
it's the missing. They get the missing piece in a freshman.
Yes, and what happens is they essentially are like what we see the year before they get dominated. They essentially keep up with them, and it's a really good game. But
to Duke's credit, I will give them this. They took that ass beating in stride and learned from it.
That's what I was trying to get at.
They became mentally tougher because of what UNLV did to them.
Yes.
And I think to a man, if they had played on that team and the year after, Grant Hill obviously wasn't part of that.
Yeah.
But if you had asked a Bobby Hurley or a Christian Leitner to a man and said, did you learn anything from that? They would say, oh yeah, we needed to be mentally tougher and roll with the punches, and that's why we became good, by getting the shit kicked out of us.
And we see, so at the end of this game, we see Greg Anthony, I think he had 4 fouls at the time, and he gets called for a charge. And
which is total bullshit.
If you look at this charge, and I forget who it, I think it might have been Leitner, he's like literally both of his feet are moving, and he's like moving, and it's just
flopping.
It's just really a bad call.
Because UNLV, I think, was up 3 at the time.
Yes.
If they get the Anthony bucket and 1, the game is pretty much in the bag.
If you watch it too, everybody on UNLV is so sure that it's an and 1.
Yeah.
And you're just like, yep. And
there it goes.
And then you hear the announcer just like, oh no, that's a charge. And everyone's just like, what? So Anthony goes out. Krzyzewski's just like, we knew Anthony had 4 fouls. And I was like, everybody needs to be taking a charge, which, I mean, he's not wrong with that. It was just a bad call.
It was just a bad call. But it's funny because they had trained, the Final Four was in Indianapolis, and they were training at a high school. And I had seen this. And Tark, during the practice, was like, this team's not focused.
Yep.
I don't know what it is. This is the best team I've ever coached, but like, we could potentially lose this game. And that's what they did. They lost 79-77.
Well, we see the last possession. Larry Johnson brings it up, and he dishes it, I think, to Augman or maybe even Hunt.
Yeah, one of the two, yeah. Just doesn't go in.
Yeah, I think Tark's wife said that for like the next year, Larry Johnson's answering machine said,
Yep.
I know, I should have taken the last shot. I know. And that's all his answering machine said, because you could see without Greg Anthony bringing the ball up the court, Larry Johnson for a second tried to bring the ball up the court, but then he was just out of place. And
I mean, Johnson was
sucked.
the Naismith Player of the Year that year.
Yeah.
And that's what made it sick. And it's this loss that starts the downfall.
Well, yeah. So this is when I feel like the NCAA was like, all right, your stars are leaving. We're going to hit you with every single penalty we can.
And because the probation started the next year, and it ends up being Tark's last year,
Yep.
because you see the issues with the school administration and the taping of the illegal practices and everything. And at that point, he's had enough.
It's just, it has to be so shitty to have your own, essentially your own team, your own,
Yeah.
That's what it should be. You guys are at the same university. It should be a giant team going against you.
And yeah, he threw his hands in the air and he resigned.
It sucks.
After the 91-92 season. They had a great year, but obviously no postseason play.
Yep.
But they finished strong.
Yeah.
They finished strong, and basically since then, they made some runs as far as in the WAC and then later the Mountain West, but it's never been the same for UNLV.
No.
It's never been the same.
And
it's
obviously
tragic.
obviously not the same type of high pace, exciting basketball, because that's something that somebody else said was they constantly were a great show, and it made it so much like a Vegas team.
They were Showtime before Showtime.
Oh, I love
Showtime
that.
During Showtime.
Yeah.
And let me just bring this up before, we kind of wrap this up. I'm talking about 86 to 91 for UNLV.
Yes.
All of this is happening. In this 5-year period, they made 3 Final Fours and 1 Elite Eight.
Yep.
In the PCAA from 86 to 88 and Big West in 88 to 91, in 5 years, this team was 163 and 22 overall and 83 and 7 in conference play.
It's crazy.
You talk about straight up dominance. Like, that's just dominance.
Yeah.
And one thing I want to bring up about Jerry Tarkanian is after all of this mess, Fresno State, where he graduated from and played basketball for, offers him a job. Dog shit program.
Yep.
And they've been in really a dog shit program since he left. But during that period, he did the same thing he did at UNLV. JUCO guys like Chris Herron, who we could do an episode on, who had been suspended for drugs, or Courtney Alexander for domestic abuse, and Ray for Austin for a whole bunch of weird shit.
Yeah.
He built them into a winner using the same formula that he did at UNLV.
Using guys that other programs essentially threw away.
Discarded. Or JUCO guys that weren't deemed good enough or academically qualified. And I have a hell of a lot of respect for that guy, particularly for how much he hated the NCAA. And all I am going to say is I am glad that in 2013 he was finally inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame for his contributions. For better or for worse, the man deserved it. And everyone should appreciate this era of college basketball that UNLV brought, because it's the type of stuff that we're watching today.
Hey everybody, this is just a stock message at the end of every episode. We hope you enjoyed whatever athlete and or team that episode was about. Just want to say, give us a quick follow on all social media. We have a YouTube channel, the Sports Experience Podcast, and we're on Instagram, DiTolla Dominic, and myself, C. Quinn Comedy. So give us a follow all around. We're always recording right here at Engle Studio. Thank you all very much.